A hush like rolling thunder spread through the red-carpeted corridors of Buckingham Palace when Prince William, heir apparent and unflinching modernizer, quietly told the senior courtiers what they had long suspected but scarcely dared to voice. When his time comes, there will be no path back into public life for Prince Andrew, no balcony waves, no ceremonial uniforms, not so much as a scout hut ribbon to cut. The words, delivered in William's calm baritone, landed with the weight of a guillotine blade. Within minutes staff were stealing glances at one another, half shocked, half relieved, as though a dank and lingering fog had finally been dispersed by a hard north wind. King Charles, already gaunt from an arduous private battle with cancer, was caught utterly unprepared. One witness describes the monarch's expression emptying of color, his fingers tightening around the arm of an antique chair as if steadying himself on the decks of a pitching ship. For decades he had tried to balance familial loyalty with public duty, gently shrinking Andrew's footprint while shielding a brother's pride behind palace walls. Now that cautious approach lay in pieces at his feet, scattered by a son who has never fully forgiven, never fully forgotten. William's stance, though broadcast only to the most trusted circle, traveled at lightning speed through the palace grapevine. According to one senior aide, the prince expressed neither anger nor triumph, only a somber certainty that the crown's credibility demanded an irreversible break. "No quiet comebacks," he said, in the measured cadence he uses when issuing orders in the guise of suggestions. "The public will not accept half measures. Uncle Andrew's chapter in royal service is closed." The phrase closed echoed down vaulted staircases, tugging at every memory of disgraced dukes and tarnished arms. Princess Anne, born with a backbone forged of Highland steel, offered her nephew a terse nod of approval. Duty before comfort has always been her creed. She, too, had endured the awkwardness of sharing charity receptions with a brother whose presence drew as many flinches as smiles. Behind closed doors she is said to have told William, "You are quite right, there is no room for sentiment when the ship of state is taking on water." Even in private Anne's prose is famously clipped, yet the loyalty beneath her brusque exterior is unwavering. Outside the palace, Britain's collective memory of the Virginia Giuffre allegations remains raw. Andrew's televised denial in that ill-fated Newsnight interview still plays on loop whenever scandals resurface, his peculiar claim of being physiologically incapable of sweating, his awkward insistence on a Pizza Express alibi, each detail etched into public consciousness. Though the legal settlement spared a courtroom ordeal, it also cemented an image of a prince permanently out of step with modern accountability. William's generation, raised beneath the unforgiving glare of 24-hour media, knows how quickly reputations curdle when half-truths are served to a hungry press. King Charles's instinct has always leaned toward reconciliation, perhaps because he has walked the long road from public scorn to grudging affection himself. Yet fighting cancer leaves little bandwidth for family firefights. Doctors counsel rest, the monarch insists on routine. He continues to host investitures, thumb through red boxes, and plan garden party menus with the brisk cheer of a man determined to outpace his own prognosis. "If you slow down," he reportedly confided to a courtier, "you risk never starting again." And so, with willpower as morphine, he soldiers on even as his son redraws the monarchy's future in bolder strokes. In the royal pecking order, Charles still reigns, but William's influence now drives the strategy meetings. Public opinion charts unfurled across polished tables show a stark truth. Any lingering sympathy for Andrew hovers in the single digits, a flatlining heartbeat of approval. Every time the disgraced Duke is glimpsed riding to church at Windsor, social media sentiment nosedives. William, ever the pragmatist, sees data where others see nostalgia. To him, the monarchy's brand is an heirloom vase, one shatter is forgivable, a second may leave only dust. Privately, William carries older wounds. Friends recall chilly teenaged afternoons at Balmoral when Andrew, secure in seniority, barked instructions at the young princes or traded jokes that left Catherine, then still Kate Middleton, feeling conspicuously unwelcome. These slights, minor at the time, accrued interest over the years as Andrew's scandals ballooned. Now they flavor the Prince of Wales's resolve. Protect the institution, spare the next generation the indignity of inheriting a compromised legacy. This is William's North Star. Princess Anne's endorsement strengthens his hand, but the courtship of consensus remains delicate. There are traditionalists in grey waistcoats who blanch at the thought of exiling a blood prince outright. They mutter about precedent, about Christian forgiveness, about the dangers of family schism. William listens politely, then counters with brutal arithmetic. A single photograph of Andrew on palace steps erases months of goodwill earned by charitable work, environmental projects, mental health campaigns. It is a toxin that no rebrand can dilute. Meanwhile, Andrew passes his days in relative seclusion at Royal Lodge, the sprawling grace and favour home that once echoed with the laughter of Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie. These days the corridors are quieter, staff fewer, phone calls shorter. He rides, he reads, he waits. Sources close to the lodge confess that he still harbours faint hope of redemption, perhaps a discreet role as patron of some maritime society, a sombre face at remembrance events. Those hopes now flicker like candles in a draught. The public mood grew harsher still after news broke of Virginia Giuffre's recent death from cancer, an event that reopened old headlines like fresh wounds. Social media timelines flooded once more with grainy photographs of Epstein's Manhattan mansion, of Andrew waving from palace gates decades before disgrace. William watched the tide and concluded any path back for Andrew would swamp the monarchy in uncontainable outrage. His judgment was swift, irreversible, and this time communicated with a statesman's poise that left no crack for negotiation. Just as the palace tried to tamp the embers, a seemingly unrelated spark flew in from across the Atlantic or, more precisely, from Ottawa. King Charles had journeyed there to become only the second sovereign in history to open Canada's parliament. The speech, carefully crafted to weave Indigenous reconciliation with environmental stewardship, should have glowed unchallenged. Instead, cameras zoomed in on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's feet, petrol green and pumpkin orange Adidas gazelles peeking out from beneath an otherwise sober navy suit. Royal fans erupted, mourning the perceived disrespect. In palace drawing rooms the consensus was bemused rather than outraged. Charles has always indulged eccentric footwear in private, but aides still winced at the optics. Britain's monarch delivers gravitas, Canada's leader counters with cocktail hour chic. The contrast reminded courtiers how fragile ceremonial respect can be, and how swiftly symbolism slides into farce. For William, the sneaker flare-up merely underscored his larger argument: the monarchy can ill afford additional self-inflicted wounds. Modern eyes scrutinize every detail, from shoelace color to handshake duration. They will certainly excoriate any attempt to rehabilitate a prince whose name evokes court documents and television calamity. Protect the crown, whatever the personal cost, that mantra echoes louder each week. Yet in the quiet of Clarence House's private sitting room, Charles wrestles with the paternal ache of casting off a son's uncle forever. The king knows that families do not operate like corporations. Muted boardroom language cannot soothe the sting of blood ties severed. He nursed Andrew through measles, lent him state carriages on wedding mornings, watched him swagger in naval uniform. Abdicating hope for redemption feels like abandoning a lifeboat before the last flare is fired. Still, the monarch is pragmatic enough to see the writ on the wall his heir has sketched: survival requires sacrifice. Princess Anne, sipping Earl Grey by the fire, recalls their mother's creed: you are not born into this family to enjoy it. You are born to serve. Where Charles's eyes missed at the memory, Anne's narrow with resolution. Service means making the hard call, even when the casualty is a sibling. In a bid to manage fallout, palace communicators have drafted a future-facing blueprint, a slimmed-down royal roster showcasing tireless duty, unblemished records, and inclusive outreach. William at the helm, Catherine at his side, the radiant Wales children symbolizing renewal, princess and anchoring tradition, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh reinforcing stability. Nowhere on that flowchart appears the once-beloved Duke of York. The blank space speaks volumes. Andrew himself remains in limbo: no charges, no trial, yet no formal vindication. He contends, in private letters to friends, that settling the lawsuit was wise pragmatism, not admission. The public, however, long ago rendered its verdict, and opinion polls freeze it in digital amber. One senior editor confided that any front-page photograph of Andrew spikes newsstand sales, but for the worst possible reasons: readers buy to scoff, not to sympathize. William's decree therefore serves a dual purpose: moral and mercantile. It satisfies calls for accountability while quieting shareholder panic in the business of monarchy. And if it also salves an old grievance about cold shoulders shown to a young Catherine, well, princes are human after all. Within the palace press office, a junior aide pinned a new briefing note on the corkboard, headed Future State Openings, Order of Procession. Andrew's name, long highlighted in pale Windsor green, had been gently erased. The board looked cleaner, leaner, brutally clear. Only time will reveal whether Charles can reconcile his paternal instinct with the iron logic of his successor. For now, he chooses concentration over confrontation, signing legislation, hosting ambassadors, and letting William's edict stand unchallenged, a tacit blessing wrapped in silence. Cancer, like politics, leaves little room for extraneous battles. As autumn's first chill settles over London, lamplight flickers off the gilded gates and tourists press noses to the railings, hoping for a glimpse of royal silhouettes in upper-floor windows. They will see few. Inside, the monarchy is staging its biggest dress rehearsal in decades, powering lights only where necessary, locking doors that once revolved, and polishing the jewels it still dares to wear. In that pared-back future, there is simply no place left for a prince whose story reads like a cautionary tale. And so the line the Prince of Wales drew in quiet fury becomes not merely a boundary but a prophecy. The crown will glide into the next era lighter, sharper, and utterly unforgiving of shadows that refuse to lift.